Elevator maintenance folks, what is the weirdest thing you have found at the bottom of the elevator chamber? OMFG, I know who dropped those. Like exactly, a person I know told us a story about how they used to work in the ADO Brisbane office, and if anything came across their desk that was too hard, it was dropped into the bottom of the elevator shaft. We were only talking about it the other night, having a giggle about what would happen if they were ever found. They giggled, saying a shitload of files went missing in that shaft. This was way back in the day, like 25 plus years ago. Before computers and well before the internet. If something needed to be sent out, they would have to fill in a form by hand, and then that was typed up by another person on a typewriter and then sent out in a letter. So it was easy to make paperwork disappear. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, any time he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and go, "Yep. Total piece of crap. Inferior piece of crap," and I think he mostly did it to freak people out. One of my favorites. He got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside, rode the elevator up, and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear this sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car, so he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured out or told us how, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between the floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. My dad has a great story about this. He supervised the mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor, it was about half an inch too high, and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling, looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down, slides the magazine into the gap, and shuffles away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad could not help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day, for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. Wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. One time, we were doing a rip out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator we were taking out was a shitty old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shined my flashlight under the elevator and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun though. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count too. I gave my mom a cheap ring I found. Found a pair of underwear at a hotel. Found a full packet at a courthouse of some lady's case transcribed. Oh, I was on a mod once and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis rest ringing service. Which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy should be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I've found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent up quarters every day. There was lots of shoe bits and I was always nervous of coming across used needles in certain units. I used to work at an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was, in order to control the flow of people in the lobby, you'd push the button for your floor and the elevator would tell you which one to get on. The elevators would make sure the crowds spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the auto-open eyes used, too. I worked on the executive floor, where long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the eye and hold the doors open. You guessed it, my left hand didn't trip the eye. The doors closed on my hand, which was prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. Crushed the whole mess and lost a 2.2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised, thank goodness for a safety shut-off. I like to think that someday, someone will find a tiny treasure. I used to work at an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was, in order to control the flow of people in the lobby, you'd push the button for your floor and the elevator would tell you which one to get on. The elevators would make sure the crowds spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the auto-open eyes used, too. I worked on the executive floor, where long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the eye and hold the doors open. You guessed it, my left hand didn't trip the eye. The doors closed on my hand, which was prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. Crushed the whole mess and lost a 2.2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised, thank goodness for a safety shut-off. I like to think that someday, someone will find a tiny treasure. Been in the game 12 years now. Found a full Christmas tree last month. Other finds 5K in 20 pounds notes, big ass bag of drugs. Roughly 5 kilograms brand new shoes by the box load. Severed finger. Edit. Holy shit, this has blown up. My most commented and upvoted on Reddit. So backstory. Christmas tree was found this year on a council estate in August. Photos was taken for the office as it was rather amusing. I visit this lift every month. The money and drugs was found in the same lift shift around 3 months apart 7 years ago. The money was spilled between me and my engineer as I was an apprentice at the time. The drugs we handed into security. The shoes was found on a passenger/staff lift out the back of JD Sports. Suspect a staff member was sticking them down there and loading into a car at the end of his shift. Police was involved in this one. The finger was found in a very expensive apartment building. We talking 50 floors and £1 million and apartments. Again, police and EMG services involved in this one. Here's an obligatory, not one of the elevator maintenance folk story. My dad had a Razr phone back when they were still cool. Just to annoy him, my mom changed the ringtone to the sound of a meowing cat. My dad absolutely hated it, but didn't change it. Anyway, one day at work, he's getting out of the elevator and accidentally drops his phone into the crack between the elevator car and the doors. He calls maintenance and asks them if they can get his phone back, but they say sorry, we can't do that. So he's standing outside the elevator thinking of what to do and he gets an idea. Running into a nearby office, he asks a coworker if he can use their desk phone for a second, and proceeds to call his own phone. He does this a few times. A couple minutes later, someone else hysterically phones security, saying that there's a cat stuck in the elevator shaft. A few other people in the elevator at the time corroborate the story, so the elevator maintenance folk run the elevator up the shaft and shine some light down there. Meanwhile, my dad and some other people are standing by the open doors to the shaft, looking downwards. My dad says, "Hey, I don't see any cat, but I think I see my phone down there. Can you guys grab it for me?" And they do. I am not an elevator maintenance person, but I have been in dozens of elevator shafts for work. I'm a bomb tech, and when I was in the army I did a lot of POTA/VIP missions in conjunction with the Secret Service. They don't have a bomb squad, so they steal us. It's a great gig, you get to travel all over and stay in some insanely nice hotels. Anyway, the elevator shafts must be cleared to ensure that there aren't any explosive devices. Basically, any place that POTUS or the VIP will go needs to be checked out. I've done a fair amount of elevator surfing, which is riding on top of the car. The weirdest, and funniest, thing I've seen was a 12-inch, around that height, Superman figurine that had its feet glued to the top of the elevator. The head was slightly tilted back and the arms were pointed upwards, so it appeared like Superman was flying up, and away whenever the elevator was in use. I have a picture of it saved on an external hard drive somewhere. That shit was hilarious. So I'm a fire alarm technician, and in buildings with a fire system, we have to test the detectors in the elevator shaft on an annual basis. The elevator tech gets called in, and while he does his inspection, we get access to the detectors. The weirdest thing we've ever found? One time we went into an elevator pit and there were hundreds of little balled up pieces of tin foil all over the floor of the pit. We unrolled one and inside was a roach. Not the bug, the discarded stub of a joint. Apparently some kid in the building would walk down the stairwell, go into the back alley and smoke AJ. Then ball up the roach in a piece of tin foil, and since there was no place to dispose of it, and probably didn't want to get caught throwing it away in his apartment, he just chucked them down the elevator shaft as he went back up. Concierge knew which kid it was because he saw him on the security cameras, so he just told the kid, "Hey, we don't want you throwing the tin foil balls down the elevator shaft, so if you have anything to throw away, you can use the bin behind my desk, and I won't say a word." Okay, I know this might be fucked up, but when I lived in an apartment building with an elevator, I would often leave things in the elevator shaft just to mess with the maintenance guy. It started because I knew he was superstitious and paranoid, and he had been a total dick to my female roommate and asked her for an alternative payment in exchange for him fixing our fireplace. So, yeah, I used to leave things just to mess with him around the apartment complex. In the elevator shaft, I left a pentagram circled by candles, and in the middle of it I put a porcelain doll and 2 knives I had used to clean chickens and deer, still with blood on them. Beneath the stairs on the first floor, there was an empty space he would store tools behind a metal door. In the far back corner, behind tools he rarely moved, I put a small mattress and some old Polaroids I bought at an estate sale. Scratched out the eyes and faces on some of them. So he thought someone was living under the stairs. On the roof of the building, by the AC units, I left a copy of the Satanic Bible that I got from some girl I had met on Tinder and slept with. She tried to convert me to Satanism, and I was perfectly happy being a non-believer in all religions. So the story the maintenance guy told our landlord was that there was a satanic witch squatting under the stairs and performing rituals and practicing witchcraft in the elevator shaft. I moved out with my girlfriend soon after that. But my old roommate said she heard from the landlord that the maintenance guy moved out of the building, and the landlord figured out it was me shortly after I moved out. The landlord thought it was hilarious. I work full-time maintenance at a university that has many elevators throughout the various buildings. In the 6 years I have been at the school, I have checked elevator shafts and found many things, but most interesting part to me is that people will drop their stuff down there and just abandon it. Entire wallets, more cell phones than you might think, cash, books etc. I can't recall any one particular item standing out, but they can't all have been dropped unknowingly, which means there are people who just consider it gone forever. My department will get calls to stop an elevator to retrieve an item, and it really isn't a big deal, but without fail there will be other equally important items with a layer of dust on it in the pit also. Campus PD does their best to get that stuff back to the owner, but inevitably some goes into lost, found, never to be claimed. I have a friend on the force who has confirmed to me that many things are never claimed. Kind of a long uneventful answer, I know, but you seemed really interested, so I thought I would share my elevator experience with you. I'll let you know if I find something like a handgun or just a hand LOL. Years ago, I was on maybe week 2 or 3 of my first big boy job after college. I worked accounts payable for a large healthcare company, and we were positioned on the 18th floor of our building, which happened to be the executive level only BC. There was no other place to put our small AP department. Being the peon, I was in charge of making the trek down to the post office every day and getting the business mail. On one particular day, I forgot my work lanyard, which held my door pass and all my work keys at home, so I borrowed one of our vice president's keys to go get the mail with. The time came and I walked to the elevator, and right as it opened, I somehow fumbled the keys and they fell perfectly down into the seam on the floor. I could hear them clanking all the way down to the ground level. Took a week to get the elevator maintenance people out there, as this wasn't an emergency. That is 1 week that I thought I was surely being fired. The VP hated me from then on, but we just didn't talk. I never got let go for it. Being in AP, I received and coded the bill from the elevator people. It was around $1,000 for someone to open the ground floor door and get the keys. I have no idea why they never took that out of my paycheck. Not an elevator tech, but we were running a warrant at a horrible multi-story building that had been essentially abandoned by the owners. We knew the top floor had been riddled with access ways between many of the old apartments by kicking through the dry wall. Essentially most of the top floor was a single super apartment. We knew the elevator was out, so we hit the stairs as soon as we pulled up. The building was abandoned to the point of smelling bad, but we knew there were squatters that lived here. It wasn't a huge haul up, but running stairs with all your gear isn't exactly a vacation. We got to the top floor and started working on containment. Within a minute or two we heard calls of contact behind us, followed by the yells for someone to get on the ground. The floor was quickly secured with no injuries, which is a good day. Rounding back to the entry hallway, we learned that our suspect had kicked down the drywall opposite the elevator, and thrown some bundles down the elevator shaft before he was taken into custody. A quick conversation, asking the folks on the ground floor to pop the elevator doors and see what was there. Horrible idea. Within seconds a screamed "Stop! No!" was heard up the stairwell. The ground floor of the elevator was completely filled with crap, as part of the ceiling from the elevator had caved in, and the cast-off of humanity was seeping in. We rapidly learned that it was even worse for the second floor, as it was filled almost to the top. Yeah. The abandoned building had a trash chute, in the form of the broken elevator shaft. All kinds of crap, dirty diapers, a dead cat, syringes, garbage bags, garbage out of bags, little fluffs of toilet paper with nasty streaks on them, broken glass, and a curious amount of unbroken bottles that all seemed to be filled with golden yellow liquid. It was a horrible, damp mess. Oh, I've got one that's relevant. My great-uncle was a truck driver years back. It wasn't uncommon in those days that people would try to steal things from his truck. One day some mafia guys walked up to the cab, held him at gunpoint, and told him to get down. They brought him up on the roof and gave him a bag. They said someone is watching him, someone will come to pick up the bag, when they do you can go home. If you look in the bag the scout will shoot. He had up there for 2 hours but nobody came. He opened the bag and there was a sandwich and a soda inside. So he ate the sandwich and walked home. They stole the truck, it was recovered abandoned. A few months later the same thing happened. This time they brought him into an abandoned building. When they got there he said he didn't care about the truck, but trying to make light of things asked if they had another sandwich. Then they threw him down an elevator shaft in the abandoned building. He broke both legs. Fortunately not long afterwards a cop was passing by and heard him screaming. He quit driving trucks after that.